Well, it's really hard because there's so many different things that I have been involved in and really liked. But I think probably my best memory is the hospital because I worked there as soon as I came to Apex. My husband and I married in February of 1963. And so the draft was still in for men, and so he was going to get drafted. And we lived in Raleigh just a short time, and so he wanted me to live with his parents, whose house is sitting on the ramp when you're going 64 West. The house was right in the middle of that road. But anyway, I stayed with them while he was in the military. And that's really when I learned a lot about Apex, because Mr. and Ms. Long, usually on a Sunday afternoon, they would go visit a place or someone, and so they would ask me to go with them often. And so I met a lot of people that way that I would not have known otherwise. And then it helped to orientate me to this part of Wake County, although it's changed so much now. But anyway, and that was a very nice experience. And then when my husband came back after being, he joined the Air National Guard, which meets over at the Raleigh-Durham Airport. And so when he got back, then we rented an apartment. There were not a lot of apartments or places to live in Apex at all. I mean, we really wanted to live in Apex, but we couldn't find a place. So Mr. Hobby, who had businesses in Cary, he had an apartment that was for rent. And so we rented for him for a year. And then after that, we bought my husband's family's house, and they built over on Hunter Street. And at this time, my daughter's living in that house. So anyway, I think just being acquainted with the community, and then the hospital was just very, it's only like about 3 miles from here, so that was very convenient for me. And I started out working night duty, and it was a lovely group of people there. In fact, I have these pictures here of people that I have worked with, and a lot of them have gone on to be with the Lord. But anyway, we had really great nurses, and all of our doctors. I reflect on the doctors that served Apex, and they were really great doctors, not only in the way they practiced, but their education. Like Dr. Goodwin went to the University of North Carolina to get his degree in medicine. And then Dr. Pearson went to Duke. And then Dr. Hart went to Bowman Gray. And then we got Dr. Nong, who has just died about a month ago. It was one surgeon, Dr. Charles Rath, practiced there before Dr. Nong came. But Dr. Nong was such a hard worker, and he and the doctors here, I mean, they were right on with what was wrong with somebody, and then if it needed surgery, Dr. Nong did it, and he was loved by everybody because he was so good at what he did, and he had a lovely personality, and he brought his nurse with him. And when you work in a hospital, some people may just kind of blow a hospital off like, well, let me go back to the history of how this happened. Before I married Alan, it came apparent that Wake County needed more hospitals. And so for them to get the hospital, for the people of Wake County to get the hospital on Newbern Avenue, they had to do something about the county. This is how I understand it. And so the people in the county would not approve, I guess, Wake Med being built until they got the division hospitals. And there was another type of organization like this in South Carolina, and I had the opportunity to go with some other administrators there and visit. But anyway, what was unique, let's see, there was one in Wake Forest, one in Zebulon, one in Fuquay, and the one in Apex. And of course, how we got Apex over Carrie getting it at the time, because the two were about the same size, and this is in the early 60s, about 60, and maybe a little bit before then. But anyway, the Dewey Powell was on the Wake County Hospital Board, and then Jennings Booth was a county commissioner. So I have figured out in my own mind that's how they got the hospital in Apex. And anyway, and we had the doctors too. All of these doctors were in place except Dr. Nong, but they had Dr. Raffett came, and other doctors came, but those were the ones that got started. And I believe it was Glenn Jones that lives here. I believe I'm right in saying that he was the first person to have surgery there. And in the hospital, we had an emergency room, an operating room, a delivery room, a newborn nursery, and 20 beds for in and out, or whoever needed a bed, and they were all semi-private. And then we had our own dietary department. We ordered supplies from Wake Med. We got our medicines from Wake Med, and a pharmacist came at least monthly to check on how things were going and what we needed and that kind of thing. They were very good about helping us. There was a person that was assigned to the lab and x-ray department. We had an x-ray room and a place where people could come and get lab work. And so they had a supervisor that went to all 4 of the hospitals and checked with the employees. And then we had our own business office, and then each hospital had a nurse administrator. And Virginia McFarland was the first one, and then Jackie Smith, who is Staley Smith's mother, she was the second one. And when Staley was born, she decided after having her 3rd child that she needed to stay at home. So anyway, she recommended me for the position, and I became the administrator and did that. I had worked night duty a year and the operating room supervisor a year, and then became the administrator. And I did that for 25 years. And it was a real good learning experience. And you learn, the thing about it being small, you learned everybody. And if they had an issue, you could help them with it, or they could feel comfortable about coming and asking you about having time off because of some event that happened in their family. So it was real good. And I would say, I think just about all of the people were from either Apex or Cary, and just in the area. So it gave people employment. And so that was a good thing too. And of course, healthcare was changing at that time, and we went through all the things that we go through in this country. But in terms of how I was thinking about our employment, we didn't have conflicts really. People have their little differences, but it was really fun working with everybody and learning. It's a continuous learning process, and I can remember some of the real sick patients that we had and some of the real sad things that we had. Oh, let me tell you about this. One thing that really changed about the highways, how 55 highway crosses 64. Well, that was not always like that. It was an intersection there, and a lot of people got killed or hurt really badly there. And I can remember them bringing them to the hospital, and if they were not deceased, then they went on to wait, because we couldn't begin to take care of all the things that they had happened to them. But anyway, I think Dr. Pearson was one, and maybe all of the doctors, but I remember Dr. Pearson was one, I think, that recommended that they do something about the highway. And so that's what they did. They did the overpass, and 64 highway then was modernized, I'll put it that way. So anyway, we had that to happen. Oh, and then another, I'm just trying to think about things that were unusual. We had a lady that delivered triplets. She was from Marsville, and she did really great. And all those babies were well, and they're probably married and have children of their own now. but I thought that was real unique that I had the opportunity to witness that. And then we had a big lobby, so that's, whenever cardiac care units came into being, which I can tell you exactly when that was. The first one, I believe, was in Winston-Salem, and it was right at the end of when I was in nurses training. And anyway, then, every hospital had to have one. And so we had asked that we could take half of the lobby and make it into a 2-bed special care unit. And I remember we had a lady that could not speak any English. I think she was Hispanic, but anyway, she could not speak any English. And so one of the administrators, the one I think at Zebulon, her daughter could. She'd been to college and she could speak. So I invited her to come over and speak to this lady so that we could help take care of her better. And so she came. And she told them that, we had taken really good care of her and that she wanted to get well. And I think we probably ended up sending her to Wake Med when we could see that most of the time it was either we didn't have something that was needed or the person would profit by some of the things that they had over there. And I went to meetings at least monthly and maybe weekly over to Wake Med to be sure that all of us went to be sure that we were duplicating as much as we could everything in the hospital system. And Mr. Andrews, he was a wonderful administrator. And he sent all of us to school, and it was mainly about leadership and making us better at what we would do. And where there was, I think it was where people were disadvantaged or needed help with things, and we might not be on the same page as they were. He taught us, sent us to a class to learn how to be able to help people, all kinds of people. And so it was, I think, a very, very good hospital. And Doug Vinsel was the administrator, and then he became the administrator over at Raleigh Community. I'm not sure what they call it now, but anyway, it was Raleigh Community then. And he is deceased, but he was an excellent person and an excellent administrator. So anyway, I had some, I think, because I nursed 50 years. My last job was at the Forest at Duke in Durham, and I was the nursing director of the healthcare center, and we had, let's see, I'm trying to think. It was about 90 beds that we had there, and I had a real good, just a wonderful administrator there, and I talked to her periodically. But anyway, I think nursing, of course, has been a big part of my life because I nursed 50 years, and I cannot walk away from that. Once a person has become a nurse, I'd say for most people, anyway for me, it never leaves you. You're always helping somebody or trying to help somebody figure out a situation, or there's some way it helps you to be a better mother, better wife. So I think nursing contributes a lot to a person's individuality as well as helping other people. So I'm glad that I thought about teaching. When you get in high school, you have to think of what you're going to do when you get out. And so anyway, I decided on nursing. And Watts Hospital School of Nursing was always considered really the best in the state. It was a 3-year school, and after over 50 years, it's probably been 60 years, after over that length of time, they have finally been able to get it accredited as a collegiate program. And I never understood what the big deal was, but anyway, because the nurses, they knew how to help a doctor do surgery. We were taught all these different phases of nursing, and then you picked where you wanted to work. And I enjoyed the experience that I had at Apex. It was unique to be able to work there. And the nurses that work there, they seem to be happy in it because it allowed them to be at home with their families, and they weren't too far away, so that they could do a good job at the hospital. So I think probably that's one of my best, probably my best experiences is having that, and then learn the people in the community, and we'd have an open house periodically over there, and just knowing the people, it helped me to learn the people in the community. So I think probably that, but I enjoyed my family, and I enjoyed the people that I met. So it's if I had to pick out one thing, I guess I'd say it was working at the hospital and being a nurse in this community. Well, it's a lot of different things that, when you live in a community, you kind of are absorbed into it and grow with it. And so that's what I feel like I have done. And I'm going to start with the geography first. When we came here, I have been told by the statistics of the town, I think it was about 1,300 people actually in town. And then I'm not in town. I'm in the edge of town. So I think with the people in the edge of town and in town, it was about 2,000 people. And that's about the size, if you can imagine, Cary was the same size, and Wake Forest and Wendell and Zebulon, and then Fuquay and Holly Springs. All there was to Holly Springs, when you go on the old Holly Springs Road, right through the middle of town, that was Holly Springs. And it amazes me how they've done a good job planning, and how we have connected to that community. And so I have just found that to be very, very interesting. And I have been to the other towns, and they all are growing. And I actually went over to Wake Forest part of the time when I was administrator at Apex. I went over there for about 5 or 6 years. So anyway, I love Wake Forest because in the springtime, the main street is just gorgeous. It's got azaleas and dogwoods and all the pretty things that I like. But anyway, in Apex, most of the where Salem Street is, most of those businesses were owned by families, and I reflect on that, and I really liked it. Harry Beasley had the Beasley store, where you could go in there and just about buy anything. I mean, it was he sold furniture. I found out after I had been in there that he sold furniture now, and people told me that they had bought furniture from him. And then the Bentons were the Bennetts were across the street, and they sold, I think, clothing and shoes. And then Miss Pegram she was a history person in Apex. She was the first woman to ever be a pharmacist that graduated from the University of North Carolina. So anyway, she opened up a drugstore and a pharmacy. It's kind of in the middle of the street when you're going, let's see, which way would we be going? West. It would be on your right, kind of in the middle of the block. And also the post office was there. And then the bank was where the bakery is. And I talked to Miss Penny, she's deceased now, but she told me all about the bank robbery. She was in the bank when they had the bank robbery, and that was, of course, big news in Apex. But she came out of it just fine. And then, let's see, across the street where the pizza place is, that was a drugstore, and Charles Bennett ran that for a while, but before him it was, I think, the Booth family. But anyway, it was a drugstore for a long time. And then my husband, I think probably it would have been next door to it. It would be on that side real close to the drugstore. It was a grocery store. And so he said that's how he learned to cut up a chicken, and he taught me how to. But anyway, he worked there when he was in high school, and his sister worked at one of the drugstores, and I'm not sure which one it was, but anyway, that was how growing up was. You got a little part-time job after when you got over 16. And then let's see, oh, and it was a dime, we always called it the dime store, but I think it was called Pope's. But anyway, it was a store you could go in and you could find anything from a needle and thread to something to wear. And let's see, I'm going to forget the Pose. The Pose had, it was brothers, and they had material, you know, back when ladies made their clothes, the clothes for the family. And also, I didn't realize it until I did further study, but they had all fertilizer and all kind of things for the farmers, because this was a farming community. Everywhere we see housing developments now, those were tobacco fields. In fact, right across the street, Ms. Minnie Glover and her daughter lived, and the housing development, St. James Village, was their property. And so, you know, it got sold, and it has been developed with houses. And so anyway, these places where these condos and different things, you know, homes built, and then Salem Woods is on the other side of me. And you know, if every housing development could be like that, it would be really nice, because they have close to an acre of land with the house. It makes the houses look real pretty, and I like it a lot. But anyway, let's see, who else was down that street? Well, that was the side that Harry Beasley was on. Oh, there was steps that went upstairs, and that's where Dr. Hart's office was. And I got to tell you this, it tickled me when I heard him say, I don't know if he told it or somebody told it, one of his employees, but anyway, this said that when a woman was going to have a baby, that they would sit out in the car until that baby got ready to come, and then he would go deliver it. So I don't know if that, I'm sure it was true or they wouldn't have been telling it. But anyway, at that time when I came to Apex in the early 60s, people would still pay the doctors with a bag of potatoes or a ham or whatever they had. They would pay them that way. And so that was one of the things that the doctors were real good about, working with their patients and the families and everything. And Dr. Pearson's office was down in the Pegram building. The Pegrams, anyway, it's the building on the south end of Salem Street, and it's the Hollands are in that drugstore, and then Dr. Pearson's office was right beside of that. And the post office got moved from North Salem Street to South Salem Street, and then it got moved out on 55. And then, let's see, Susan Powell and her husband, they had a clothing store, and I believe it's a real estate, it's right beside of the bakery now. But like I say, you know, really all the stores basically were owned and run by local people. And then if somebody wanted to buy something in Raleigh and they didn't have transportation, there was a bus that came on a certain day, and they would go and spend the day and then come back. And I know that I believe it was Hamilton Martin was telling me when his mother went, if she saw a piece of furniture she just had to have, she'd come back home and work on Mr. Martin. Oh, Martin's store, that was another one. That was a hangout for a lot of the men in town, and they had a potbelly stove, I think, in there at one time, and they would come and they'd talk, town talk. But anyway, Hamilton was one of my favorite people in Apex, and I was so sad when he died. That's one of the things, you make friends and then you have to give them up somewhere along the way. But I went to the Apex Baptist Church for about 50 years. So that was where my husband's family went. And anyway, there were some changes that occurred, so I've switched over and I go to the Methodist church, which is really changed. Oh, that church was tiny when I first came to Apex. It was, I think probably I went there for a funeral maybe, but it was very, very small. And anyway, one of the houses that was right beside of it has been torn down, and the part of it's the parking lot and the parsonage and the business buildings for the Methodist church. But anyway, it's a painting, a photograph of it that Buddy Holland took, and it's over the fireplace in the living room at the Maynard Pearson house. But anyway, I want to tell you about the two, Maud and Maybelle Norris. When I had heard, you know how you hear stories about different people that live in town. Well, I heard this story about them, and I thought, well, they got to be kidding me. Well, they weren't. Maud and Maybelle, Maud took care of Maybelle. Maybelle was going to get married, and something happened that she didn't get married. So her and Maud lived in this house, and I never did get to go in it, but they said it was just gorgeous, and that the picket fence that was built around it was built when the Yankees were going home to make money to get home. So that was one of the stories that I heard. But anyway, do you know they dressed just like they had always dressed? Their clothes were down to the ankles, and then they had these old button-type shoes. I just couldn't hardly believe my eyes, because I had not seen anybody to not change, you know, how we change with what's available to us. But anyway, but they were coming to church, and that's when I first got here. And it was, I know that I have lived through probably at least, because I was just in my early 20s, so I've probably lived through at least one or two generations of people that have lived here and their families. And both churches are outstanding. I still go over to the Baptist church. They have a special gathering the second, I think it's the second Tuesday or Wednesday. But anyway, somebody invited me, so I went, and then I go over to the Methodist church. And usually I have been a choir member all my life, and so I continue to participate in that. And both churches do a lot of good for the community. And right now we are collecting clothing for the Wake County Crisis Ministry, which is another organization that I think the pastors and other people saw that there was a need to have a place like the Wake Crisis Ministry, and they had meetings. And anyway, I think there was actually a lady that got it started. But anyway, they help people in need. And I know somebody that the daughter was not able to work, and she needed a place to live, and so she rented from me, and so they were able to help her out. So it's Wake Crisis Ministry is really a good organization that has developed here over time. And then I've met a lot of people, and I thought I knew a lot of people, and now there's been such an influx of new people that it's hard for me to meet everybody. But I do meet a lot of people at church, and the people that have actually lived here it seems like that they're getting less and less of them, and more people are coming here. And so that's, I think, the number of people that have come here and the way the building of the community has occurred are two of the biggest things that I have seen that have changed since I've been here. I understand, is it about 70,000 people now that are in Apex? That is hard to believe, because when I came to Raleigh, it was only 90,000, and North Hills was just being built. It was just, and Cameron Village was there. But anyway, Apex, the only place to go shopping was in downtown. And then later we had the Beaver Creek, and And 55 certainly has changed the, I'm trying to think of it was beside the high school, which is now the middle school. But anyway, there was a place there where people went for hamburgers and hot dogs. The Tyndalls owned it. That building's is right beside the ball field. But anyway, another way I remember Apex is when I was living in Durham. I grew up in Durham County, and we would go to the beach. And so we'd always stop at Apex to get gas and a drink, you know, Pepsi or Coke or whatever we wanted. And so we always stopped up there at Salem Street in 55. We would always stop there. So anyway, I think all of these things have meant something to me. And I've met some really nice people. One lady that I know, her name is Peggy Rigsby. She was telling me, I think it was either her grandfather or great-grandfather, the intersection where Hunter Street comes into North Salem, right there where there's a seamstress there. There was a chemical plant there when I came. Mr. Mealick Blades had that. But before that, it was a tobacco auction warehouse business. It was a tobacco auction warehouse, I guess you'd call it. But anyway, in Wake County, Apex was the first place to have an auction warehouse. And it was right there on that corner. And Peggy's, either it was her daddy or her granddaddy, started it. And then her daddy was one of the auctioneers. Anyway, I think what happened is once people brought the people that were in Wake County would bring their tobacco there to sell it, and then they got the railroad going to Durham to take it to Durham where they made the cigarettes. So I'm real familiar with the American Tobacco Company. My uncle worked on Lucky Strike side, and my mother worked on Herbert Tarrant, and then Liggett Myers came along, and that was how people made their living because people didn't get to go to college. That just really got started about in my generation, and it was primarily boys that were able to go. But anyway, all of that has changed, and everything people keep trying to look at ways to improve things. So I hope that we can continue to be practical, I think is the word I want to use, practical about what we do in Apex. Okay, when I moved here, I had some people that I knew that were in the Apex Historical Society, and they asked me to join, and so I couldn't do it until about the end of, let's see, it would have been about 19 in the 90s. Let's see, yeah, because I've been in it over 20 years, and so I decided that, yes, I would join it because I've always loved history. I loved the history of North Carolina. We had wonderful history teachers when I was in school, and we had North Carolina history in the 8th grade, and then our teacher took us to Raleigh and took us to Chapel Hill, and it was a lot of fun. So it made history just come alive for me. So anyway, I got interested in the Apex Historical Society, and Molly Johnson, she was, and Buddy Holland, and John Pearson, and I'm trying to think of, there's other people that were involved in it, and it was a learning experience to see how they did. Oh, Hamilton was in it because he was trying to find out all the cemeteries that were older in the Apex area, and we would have meetings about once a month, and people would get up and tell about the different things that they were working on. And that was one of the things that I remember that he was working on. And then where, let's see, it's off of Olive Chapel Road where the school is. Right across the street was a cemetery, and they did not know who it belonged to. And so one of the things that I did, I went to look at it, and I didn't know a soul that was connected to it. But anyway, I think they made a decision about what they were going to do because there's buildings on it now. But anyway, we have taken an interest in a lot of different things in the area, and we have a wonder down at the Halley Center that we try to put a display in. We've had one about the hospital, and we have something at Christmas time when we have about 5 houses usually on the home tour, and this is so that people can see the older homes and who's bought them and what they're doing to them, and that's really a lot of fun. I've enjoyed doing that. And then we decorate the Maynard Pearson house, and people get to see how that looks on the inside, and it's really beautiful when it gets decorated. And then in the spring we have a plant sale, and all of that money goes to pay the insurance and the bills and to keep the house up and everything. And just, I guess probably about 6 years ago, we had the house painted, and we have had the roof worked on. We had somebody during a snowstorm, they skid across the road, went across the yard, and hit the edge of the porch. We were all amazed that they did that. But anyway, we've had, usually we have about 100 members, and because of COVID and all the things that's happened, of course, we've had to try to get our membership back up. But anyway, we have we generally change presidents about every year or two, but we have the same one now. So anyway, and we have a board that helps to govern what all we do, the home tour and the activities. We usually have a booth at peak day so that we can promote the club, and we have different dinners and speakers and, just different things to try to promote interest in the history of the town, because it is unique. Every town is a little bit unique and different. So we like to promote the goodwill of the Apex Club. Yeah. And there's pictures in there. Dr. Pearson and Woodrow Maynard were their pictures in the front, and they were involved. The family of Woodrows there in the front in that picture. And then we have all kind of historical documents and people's pictures and all in there, and some of the old pictures, how Apex used to look, and of course the house that I was telling you about that the Norrises lived in, Buddy took that, and we have a picture of Dr. Pearson that we just hung in there. And I was telling you about the diploma of Dr. Mann, who wanted to be a optometrist, and he went to dental school, and then he went to optometrist school, and so he was a circuit riding optometrist, and we have some of his glasses that he had prescribed to people in the house, and it's full of all kind of, people have given furniture, and we have things that the Norrises had, and a real old sewing machine. And so anyway, it's interesting. We have people that have actually had some parties and things out there. So that's been a lot of fun. And so I hope for the future of Apex that more people will be interested in history, and that they will join the club and be an active member. We have this plant sale. We have that let's see, it's the Saturday before Mother's Day. And people that have come there have been coming there for years, and they say that they look forward to it because of the variety of the plants and getting information about the plants and where to put them. And it's interesting how one year everybody will be looking up for irises, and then the next year they won't hardly buy any. So it's interesting how all of this evolves. And in terms of apex, there's one concern that I have, and it's because I'm a nurse, I think. As buildings are built in apex, I would like to see more thought being given to just making the buildings, if it's a condo or an apartment complex or something like that, just limiting it to 2-story, because as people age, it will be hard for them to get up more stories than that. And people break their feet, their knees, their legs, their arms, what have you, trying to go up and down steps. And you don't even think about it when you're your age. I never thought about this. Really, I knew it factually from nursing. I knew people broke their hips and the results of that and everything. But more of the population is aging, and we need to be very thoughtful about how houses are built, that it's safe for seniors to live in them and that they can go about not hurting themselves. And when my husband and I picked out this house plan, I didn't even consider it, didn't even think about it. Well, the house I grew up in was 1-story, but my grandparents was 2-story. But then I heard Dr. Hart was the one that I remember him talking about living on 1 level. And his house that he had built, it was 1 level, I think. There may have been a basement or something under it. But anyway, I am so grateful that I live in this house because it's all on 1 level. I don't have to go up and down steps, and because I have joint pain, and I just think we need to be thoughtful about. This happens to some people after they get in their 50s, but most of the time I would say it's in your 70s and 80s, and people are living longer. So I think it's real important for us to give thought about the buildings that are going up in apex for that reason. And I'm hopeful that maybe I can go to a town meeting and just verbalize that and think that perhaps somebody would hear what I'm trying to say, because, like I say, when you're younger, you don't even give that a thought. And so that's one thing. And I, planning a town is always hard because you're never going to please everybody. But I do think as we are changing, that a lot of thought needs to be given into how things are being done. One of the things that I found was this, I don't know where this came from. It says Apex Cares. But anyway, it shows about the incomes that people have. And I heard a speaker, I went to one of these meetings about affordable housing, and I may be wrong, but I think I heard that people somewhere, the average person makes around $110,000 a year. And I thought to myself, that might be true, but not the average person is not making that kind of salary. Because I don't think nurses are making it, and I don't think teachers are making it, and policemen are not. But anyway, I do think that we need to, because when I got married, salaries were bad. One person was making two people were making what one person could make, and that was not much then. And so I do think that we need to be very thoughtful about what people can afford and make before they start. All right, we've already had in Wake County taxes increased, and so this is what my thinking is about taxes, is that when you get 65, whatever you're paying for taxes, let it freeze right there. It doesn't mean you're not going to pay any. It means you're going to pay what you've been paying, because your salary's not going up. And then people that are getting salary increases and making these better salaries, let them help contribute to these increases. So anyway, as I have lived here, I have learned more ways to be able to help improve that. And I think that a lot of times we don't write letters. I think we can write letters or contact people who represent us, say in the county commissioners or the legislature. We have some good people in the legislature right now that I know. And the issues that are nationwide, it seems like that they are not affecting us as in the same way in North Carolina, that there's a lot of thought given to what happens in our state, and I like that. Doesn't always suit me 100%, but I'm glad that we can have some input in it, and that we can feel that at least somebody has listened to us. And so I think going through our representatives, even on up to the Senate and the House of Representatives, there are things that I have heard people say they couldn't get straightened out, and so they went to, Jesse Helms was one of them. Whether you voted for him or not, he fixed that problem. So I think that it depends on what the problem is. You go and express your opinion instead of just complaining about it. So I think that's a good thing. And I have enjoyed meeting new people. A lot of people that I never thought I would meet, I have met through the church and through organizations. And when I tell them I've been here so long, they want me to come and talk to them. So anyway, it's we're living in changing times, and we'll all adjust to it. And I hope that as the community change, that people will have, make suggestions that will be heard. And that would be my greatest desire, I think, is for people to hear what people are saying. And I know that they did have, it was up over the Halley summer, they had some kind of time, I can't remember what you call it, but anyway, people in the community could come, and they had little stations where you could write down your ideas, and then they took all those ideas and I'm sure used them in some way. So I think the more that they can have input from people, that's good.